So I can have multiple things out here. So this is what we normally follow in an organization. Normally in the organizations where we worked, we follow a unique naming convention. Let's say the reason behind naming it in this way is because anyone who joins a new project, or anyone, let's say if you want to explain anyone, you have to tell them that this is the naming pattern that we follow. For example, let's say the name of the service changes to SQL database. Let's say tomorrow you want to create a SQL database. Just copy this entire name out here. Instead of storage ACC, out here, you can say it as SQL DB. So you just change the name of the services, or change the name of the team, or change the name of the project, and go ahead and create multiple things out here. This is how you can go ahead and name things. Again, very importantly, name should be unique. Your name cannot, I mean, the storage service name that you're taking or that you're creating cannot be taken by anyone in the entire world. That is something which is the first point. Second, the name cannot be less than 3 characters, cannot be more than 24 characters. Third point, the name cannot have a special character. It can only have lower letters, numbers, and no special characters in this. So let's come back. This is how I have went ahead and I created something known as a storage account service with a particular name out here. Now, the next thing, again, if you see all these are stars, meaning what this is now telling is that this is a mandatory field A. B is that you cannot change the name after you go ahead and create the storage account service. So if I go ahead and create a storage account service with a name called something like this, I cannot at a later point in time come and say, hey, you know what, I forgot, I created a wrong name, I have to change this. No, you cannot change it. If you want to change it, you have to delete your storage account, recreate it back again. You cannot change the name. You cannot also change the location of a storage account or a resource group. Very, very, very important. And the reason I'm stressing on the location out here is because this is something that we need to know. In a resource group, we can just go and select any particular location, shouldn't be a problem. Reason being, resource group is not an actual resource, it's just a folder which holds all your resources. So there is no significance out there. But when you are creating a storage account service, it's very important, and it's very, I mean, we'll have to do a very careful analysis of what is the region that we need to take. Again, the selection of a region, meaning the decision on which region it should be created in, this is not a role of a DevOps engineer. A DevOps engineer, as a DevOps engineer, you implement it, but how do you select this? What are the factors that influences and all that stuff? What is the pricing and etc.? This is a role of an architecture or an architect. In an organization, there's an architect and etc. But it's it's really advisable to understand what does an architect do in order to select all these things, because sometimes what happens is that if you are working with a very small project, there might not be an architect. You might have to, let's say, suggest the client on what is the location and all that stuff. So very importantly, there are a few factors that influences the location or the region where you create a storage account in. Region, very importantly, I will select a region that is close to my business. What do I mean by this is that, let's say this application is called Uber, and you are designing this application for a country called United States. Let's say this is an application that is, let's say, designed for United States and etc. So it is very advisable that you create that particular storage account service in a location called East US or East US or Central US, West US, whatever it is, for a best performance and for an ideal application, let's say, scenarios out here. So let's say I take East US out here. So the very first thing I decide, or the very first thing that I, let's say, understand is how close is my service to the business. Let's say if you're serving this application in India, you cannot have that particular storage account sitting in US. It will not give you the best performance out here. So this is the first thing that I do. Let's twist the scenario a little bit around. Let's say that particular, let's say, project, or that particular, let's say, application called Uber, this is not for US. Let's say this is for a country somewhere in Africa. Okay, let's put that in that way. So ideally, what should I do? I should go for a region, I should go for a data center, or I should select a region that is in Africa which is close to it. But if you look at Africa, Let's come down and say Africa. You see how many data centers are available out there? Only one thing, which is South Africa North. But let's say United States, the US. You see how many regions are available out here: Central US, East US, South Central US, West US, North US, and all that stuff. Reason being, when you are planning for, let's say, putting your data inside a particular data center in a particular region, you also look at the geographical and the political stability of a region. Meaning, is the region politically stable? Is the government there okay? Am I okay to go ahead and invest so much of money in there and etc.? This is also something that you, let's say, factor into picture. Also, something called geographical stability. Is there earthquakes frequently happening there? Is there tsunami that is happening there? If that happens, then my data will not be available. It's as simple as that. My data will not be available out there. So you'll have to consider, or as an architect, we'll have to consider all these factors out here before I actually go ahead and select a region. Reason being, if I select a region and I go ahead and create my storage account, I won't be able to change my region. There is no way that you can change your region out here. You have to delete it and then let's say recreate it back again. So name and region is something that you cannot change out here. Again, there are a couple of things that you cannot change. We'll also talk about that. But very importantly, you will have to be a little careful in understanding what's the name. You'll have to be a little careful in understanding in which region you want to create, and these are the factors that influences the selection of a particular region as such. So any questions till here? Anyone anything till here that I can take? Just a second, sorry. Just come back and you understand. Can we call unstructured instead of store unstructured database, or is this the same? Again, can we call unstructured database instead of storage? Not really. Database itself is structured, so you cannot call unstructured database as such. If PDF and Word documents have table, is it considered as a structured data? No. If PDF and Word document has a table, it is still considered to be unstructured data. Reason being, if I give you just a PDF file, looking at a PDF file, you cannot relate it to something else. It's unstructured in nature. And Blob is a kind of database like MongoDB. No. Mongo unstructured, kind of, you can say in that way. Mongo unstructured, kind of in that way. But okay, how to know the access is available in the container for my role? I'm not getting there yet. I'm not getting into what is a container and all these things. I will come down to that in a second. But yes, these are a couple of things. Yes, anyone offline or has a question? Does anyone offline has a question?
So, hi-
Good. Right. Just just a second. I was just taking a question offline. Just come back to you online. Yes, go ahead, please. Sorry, can you come again? Your definitely yes. If you look at this one, let's go to the storage account service. Do you see Central India here? So yes. So whatever region that you see on an RG, same thing you'll be able to see in the storage account level. So you can pick and choose this one as well. No, you cannot. It's a full stop. You cannot do that. You cannot migrate the data from one region to the other. You cannot just do that. You can download and upload it back again to another region. Yes, that is possible. Again, it also depends upon the size of the data you're talking about. Which again, terabytes of data, it'll take a lot of time to, let's say, migrate all that data to a different, say, data center or to a different region. But yes, you can download, upload it out. That's possible. Yes, someone online had a question. I'm sorry.
I mean, if you're doing a project in India, so
Hmm.
can we select the region of US? What it makes the difference? Because it is a cloud,
Uh,
isn't it?
it's a cloud, correct? But what difference does it make?
So,
Very good question. Okay.
what,
Yes, very good question. Is that if you select a region, let's say US, but your business is in India, what difference does it make? It's
yes.
just a cloud, right? Yes, it's true, it's a cloud, but what really happens? Let's understand that with an example. Let's go forward from that. This is a storage account service wherein you go ahead and store something called as blobs. Now, let's say I am working for a project called Uber. So what I do is that I design an application called Uber that you can install on your phone. So when you install on your phone an application called Uber, there is a lot of data inside it. Like let's say pricing, like let's say the hourly structure and all that stuff. All these pricings, all this data should be stored somewhere. I'm telling they are stored inside a storage account service. So let's say this is an application that you're using called Uber that is installed on your phone. So you as a user can interact with this particular application that is installed on your phone, and this particular application has a lot of data to give you, like a lot of data, like let's say what is the fare of that particular cab, or what is the class of the cab and all that stuff. So a lot of classifications, a lot of data out here that you can give. And I'm telling that all this data is stored inside a storage account. So what really happens is this: you are a user, you request for an information from this particular application called Uber. This application will go to a storage account in the background, get all the data, and send it back to you. This is how a typical workflow kind of works. So you send, you let's say click on that particular application, and that application goes back to the storage account, gets all the data, sends it back to you. Now, yes, you are right, it's just in the cloud. What difference does it make? It does make a difference. What is it is this: when I create a storage account in a region called ECS2, let's say I create a storage account in ECS2, and I ask Microsoft that, hey, you know what, I need a storage account in this particular location called ECS2. What does Microsoft do? Is that Microsoft goes in the background and it searches for a data center in the location called ECS2. Now I'm talking about actual data center, physical data centers that exist in a location called ECS2 out here. And in this data center, there are multiple servers. There are not one, not two, but multiple servers out here. And what Microsoft does, or what Azure does here, is that it will select some space on a server and allocate that space to my storage account. So what really is happening is that whenever I write a data, I am not actually writing the data inside a storage account service. I'm writing a data inside the server that is actually sitting in ECS2. Let's come back to the scenario once again. You are a user who's requesting for this particular application. You are coming from India. You're going to this particular service called Uber. This particular service is going to, let's say, something called this particular storage account. This particular storage account in the background is going to the actual physical server requesting for the data. The data is coming back to that particular storage account. It's going to the Uber application. Then finally, it's reaching out to you. All this time period, meaning the time, the second that you hit get the data, and let's say the time it takes for you to actually get the data in your application, all this time period together is called as a latency. Latency will decide the performance of your application. If my business is far away from the point of my data center, there is a lot of latency, meaning my application is slow. It makes even worse when your internet connection is bad. Your applications are slow, you cannot get the data. You'll simply close the application and say, you know what, I'll go to an auto, get the auto, and go. That's it. I don't want to waste my time, let's say, sitting on this application, try to book and all that stuff. So, very importantly, when I design or when I architect my applications, it's important for me to understand what is the latency each and every data center actually gives me. How far is a data center from me? What is the latency that it gives me? And then how should I design something out there? These are the factors that I, let's say, together factor in, or these are the factors that I take in and then go and create something. Yes, it's in the cloud, but in the background, the cloud also is working out of a data center, actual physical data center out here. And that physical data center impacts your delivery. Does that answer your question?
Kiran, I have a question in chat.
Right now, everyone is working from home, isn't it?
Mhm.
Like
Correct.
there is no, the company is not situated in one location,
Mhm.
isn't it? So some work
Correct.
in like north,
Mhm.
some work in other states.
Mhm.
Okay,
Okay.
so how this is managed?
Again, it depends upon for which region your application is actually designed. You can be anywhere. Let's say you can be, let's say, in North Europe. You go to the North Europe. Maybe the Uber service is not provisioned out there. Maybe the service is not available out there. So the first thing that I ask is, where is your application design? If you tell me that it's a global application, then I'll tell that I will have multiple storage accounts in different regions. It's globally
Okay.
distributed.
Okay. Okay. Fine. Fine.
So it completely depends upon the architecture again. If it's a regional application, it will only work in that region. You cannot go to, let's say, US and, let's say, book a, Uber cab. I mean, just theoretically telling that. If it's a
Fine.
global service, then my storage account should also be distributed globally to make sure that people all across the world experience the same amount of latency and all these things out there. Yes, someone else had a question
Okay.
on me. Uh, let's see. Storage account is down based on the region. It will be there, backup and etc. Okay. I'll answer that in a minute. Yes. Someone else has a question. I'll take that. Yes. Someone offline, online. Anyone? Does anyone have a question till you?
Sir, I have a question.
Just a second. I'll come back. Just a second. Yeah. Go ahead, please. Go ahead, Vasant.
Okay, thank you. So, if I understand correctly, since Uber is an
Mhm.
international company, Uber is serving Indian and other countries as well. So, to say,
Mhm.
when it comes to the operations of India, they may have the region selection as nearby Indian locations. Am I correct
Right.
understanding it correct?
Correct. That's correct.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Someone offline had a question. I'm sorry. Usually we hear server is down. That's related to latency. Sometimes the region can also be down. Meaning, yes, sometimes yes, it's related to latency. When you say server is down, it might be related to latency. Sometimes it also can be your own internet connection. Sometimes the backend server that we are talking about, right? That might also crash. That might also crash. That can also result in, let's say, server latencies and all that stuff. And someone else had a question: if the server crashes, what will happen? That is something that I'll address in some time. But any more questions still here? Anyone? Any more questions still here? Sorry. Yeah, right. Right. Okay. Very good question. Is that each and every location has its own pricing? You said that each and every location has its pricing. Before I go ahead and, let's say, create a storage account, how do I know about the pricing or something? For which you have something called as Azure Price Calculator. There is a website called Pricing Calculator, which will give you the price of a particular service. Let's say in my case, it's a storage account, right? If I go to storage account service, again, there are a couple of concepts in the storage account service that I did not explain yet. So I'm not going there. But East US is giving me something, let's say something like UK South, slightly less, 200, 300 rupees, slightly less out here. Let's say if I do something like slightly higher, it depends upon, see, all these factors also depend upon where the data center is hosted, the tax of that particular nation, and all that stuff. Because each and every country has its own pricing model, has its own taxing model, and all that stuff out here. So, if you, let's say, change these regions, you can right away see the base price being changed. Each and every region has its own discounts, has its own, let's say, eligibility and all that stuff. So each and every, when I change something, each and every, let's say, pricing structure also changes. Again, there are a lot of couple of factors that influences what, let's say, what are the pricing structure of a storage account and everything, which we will be seeing, let's say, in the coming sessions. Right. Mhm. Okay. Okay. Again, when you create a storage account service, the question here is that when I purchase 1000 GB, here it's written that it's a 1000 GB capacity. When I purchase 1000 GB, after some time I realize that I'm not using so much of data, I want to reduce my usage. Can I reduce it? Again, the catch here about the storage account, unlike a database, now when you select a database or when you create a database, you'll have to tell how much of data you need upfront. In a storage account, I don't tell that. This is a cumulative or a tentative cost out here, telling that if you use 1000 GB, let's say if you use only 100 GB, is that uses. So the pricing model is based upon the pay as you go model out here, meaning the usage. How much you use, depending upon that you are priced. The maximum that you can go for in a storage account is 500 terabyte. Like 1024 is 1 GB. Like that, if you go for a terabyte, 1024 GB is 1 terabyte. Like that, you can go on for 500 terabytes out here. Mhm. No, you don't select a capacity. You just create the storage account. Yes, whatever usage you do, you are charged on that particular usage as such. So when you create a storage account, Microsoft Azure tells you that you can expand yourself to 500 terabyte. That's the maximum upper scale limit that I can give you. But let's say you have only used 100 GB, I'll charge you for 100 GB only. That's how the charging, or that's how. No, you never specify the size because it's an unstructured in nature. Unstructured data is always unpredictable. You can have a lot of unstructured data out here. Structured is predictable in nature, somewhat predictable in nature. That's the reason when you create a database, you need to specify a size. Based upon that, you are charged. But for unstructured, you don't specify a size. Again, if you go to the storage account creation, there is nowhere that I mention the size of it. There is nowhere I'm mentioning the size of it. I just go ahead and create it the way it is. I get a maximum allocation of 500 terabyte. And if you use 1 KB, you are only charged for that particular 1 KB as such, depending upon the pricing model. That's how it is, kind of works out there. Yes, any more questions here? Does anyone any more questions here? Again, there are a couple of concepts called performance and redundancy and etc. I'm not going into it yet because it is a very, let's say, vast concept. I need a complete class to cover that out. And these areas are very frequently asked interview questions is where they come from. So I'll take that in, let's say, in a while. But what I want you all to do, just go to Microsoft documentation, say what is a storage account. Just do this. Let's take one step at a time. Let's say what a storage account. It will give you storage account overview. It'll tell you a storage account contains all the data and etc. Just try to read this. That's it. I don't even want you all to create it today. Just try to read it. Tomorrow we'll see how to create that out, how to store your data and all these things out here. Yes, any more questions that I can take, guys? Any more questions I can answer?
Yeah, hello, Kiran.
Good, please.
Yeah, now storage account is like a just account. So inside that there is no storage of data. Again, backend again it will go to servers only. Right?
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
See, anything related to cloud, you will have a backend server, meaning you need a physical machine to store something. You need an actual physical machine to store something. In the cloud, what happens is that you don't buy that physical server. You just rent that particular physical server, which reduces your cost in a lot of way. Let's say you can reduce the cost in, let's say, a very huge way out here. So yes, all the data and everything that we're talking about is written to a backend actual physical server as such. When you say about, okay, difference between on-premise and cloud, is that so? On-premise, as in you're able to see my laptop. This is on-premise device. On the premises meaning the surrounding. If you have devices on the surrounding, let's say if I buy a server, instead of going to the cloud, I buy a server, I store it in this room, and I go take a USB and put data inside it. It's called on-premise storage. Okay, I put some cables, I attach the cables to my system and then transfer the data into that particular server. It's an on-premise model. In here, what we are doing is we are doing a cloud model. What we are doing in a cloud model is that we are moving away from on-premise. When I say moving away from on-premise, I didn't purchase a server today, right? But I still am able to go ahead and place the data inside a server somewhere. How am I able to do it? Is because of a cloud. So what cloud is doing today is nothing but they are buying all that on-premise services called servers and all that stuff, and they're giving all the services in the form of internet, in the form of, let's say, storage accounts, or in the form of databases and etc. That's a cloud model. Yes, you can do that. You can do that. In on-premise also, you can save applications. You can store your data online also. Yes, you can do that. Yes, any. Yes. In case you delete your blob inside a storage account, when I say data, I am now using the terminology called blob. So I use blob instead of a data. You can restore the blob. We'll also see that. There is something called soft delete option in a storage account. So if you accidentally delete it, you can also undelete it. You can do that inside a storage account service. How many? Sorry. How many days you can restore? Good question. Minimum 7, maximum 365. You can tell what is the soft delete option. We'll also see that. I'm not going into the concept yet. As of now, I'm just touching on the very outline of it, very skeleton of it. Once we go inside, create it, we'll talk about all those things out on how to store your data. If it gets deleted, how do you, let's say, undelete it and all those things. Again, the intention of going a little slow is to make sure that everyone who's from a non-IT background and everyone who's from an IT background gets familiarized with these concepts, establish a level playing field, and then we can, let's say, build things on top of it. So the reason being, I'm not going into, let's say, and telling how to create it, how to access it. No, I'm not doing that. Let's understand the very basics of it. These are the basics on which we build. These are the basics on which we, let's say, work on all those things. So it's important to understand them, guys. Okay, let's see.
Yeah, hello, Kiran.
Good, please, sir.
Yeah, actually, in yesterday class, we created resource groups and all, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for that, we created some services only. If you create resource group in the sense, we created some service, right? So for that service, will that credit will deduct from our account in free trial account?
Again, resource group, you will not have any charge. There is no charge for a resource group, nothing but an empty folder. But when you create a storage account, your actual charge will come into picture. How the charge will come into picture, we'll see that. Ken Ramakrishna is asking, if we create a storage account, is it will it create a new instance in the background? Yes, it will create a new instance of a storage service in the background. Yes. Again, I did not create it out. We'll look at how to create it, how to use it, and all these things out. Okay, so with that, I'll close this session, guys. We'll meet tomorrow. We'll discuss more on what storage account services are, how do you store the data, how do you access the data, in case if it gets deleted, how do you restore it, and all these things. Thank you and have a good day, guys. Thank you.